Story 1. The Loop on Interstate 40. Robert Hayes had been driving 18-wheelers for 23 years, hauling everything from refrigerated produce to construction equipment across 48 states. He'd seen every kind of weather, dealt with every type of road condition, and thought he'd experienced everything the highway could throw at him. That confidence disappeared on a Tuesday night in October of 2022. Somewhere along Interstate 40 in the Texas Panhandle. The load was straightforward enough. Medical supplies from Oklahoma City to Albuquerque, a route Robert had driven dozens of times. He'd left at 4 in the afternoon, planning to make good time through the night when traffic was light. The weather was clear, temperature hovering around 55 degrees, and his truck was running smooth. Everything was routine until he passed mile marker 112. Robert noticed the mile marker because he'd been using them to calculate his position. His GPS had started acting strange about 20 miles back, showing his location jumping erratically between different points on the highway. He chalked it up to a satellite issue or a software glitch. These systems weren't perfect. He could navigate by the mile markers and road signs just fine. At mile marker 112, he passed a distinctive rock formation on the north side of the highway. 3 large boulders stacked in a way that looked almost deliberate, like some ancient marker. He made note of it only because it broke up the monotony of the flat landscape. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear in the vast Texas night. 15 minutes later, he passed the same rock formation again. Robert frowned, checking his odometer. He'd covered nearly 12 miles since the first time he'd seen those rocks. There was no way he'd somehow turned around or gotten on a different road. Interstate 40 was straight as an arrow through this section, no turns, no exits he could have accidentally taken. Yet there they were. The same 3 boulders, identical in every way. He grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker 19, this is Nighthawk. Any drivers on 40 westbound near mile marker 112? Static answered him. Then a voice, distant and distorted. "Nighthawk, turn back." "Say again?" Robert adjusted the squelch. "You're breaking up." Nothing but static. He checked his phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here, but combined with the GPS issues and the repeated landmark, unease began to creep into his mind. He pressed on, watching his speed, watching the road, watching for anything that might explain what was happening. 20 minutes passed. His odometer showed he'd traveled another 13 miles. Then he saw them again, the 3 boulders exactly where they'd been before at mile marker 112. Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart rate picked up. This wasn't possible. He'd been driving in a straight line, maintaining 65 miles per hour, never deviating from the westbound lanes. He looked in his mirrors. Empty road behind him. Ahead, his headlights cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but asphalt and painted lines stretching to the horizon. He decided to stop. There was no shoulder wide enough for a full rig, but he slowed down, hazards on, pulling as far right as he safely could. He climbed down from the cab, his boots hitting pavement that felt solid and real. The night air was cool, carrying the smell of sagebrush. Crickets chirped in the darkness. Everything seemed normal except for the impossible fact that he'd passed the same point 3 times while driving in a straight line. Robert walked around his truck, checking everything. Tires were fine. No mechanical issues he could detect. The trailer was secure. Load hadn't shifted. He pulled out his logbook and pen, using his phone's flashlight since there was no signal anyway. He documented everything, the time, the mile marker, the repeated passings. If nothing else, he'd have a record. Getting back in the cab, he noticed something. His trip odometer showed he'd driven 42 miles since leaving the last truck stop. But his GPS, when it bothered to show anything at all, indicated he'd only traveled 11 miles. Either the odometer was wrong or the GPS was wrong, or something was deeply, fundamentally broken about the space he was moving through. He put the truck in gear and continued west. What else could he do? Going back east meant giving up on the delivery, and he had no explanation that would satisfy his dispatcher. Sorry, I got stuck in some kind of space loop, wouldn't cut it. He'd push through, figure it out, find whatever was causing this. The highway remained empty. No other vehicles in either direction, which was unusual even for this hour. Usually you'd see at least a few other trucks, some cars, highway patrol. But the road was deserted, just his truck and the endless asphalt and those 3 goddamn boulders that appeared again at mile marker 112 after another 18 minutes of driving. Robert was breathing harder now, genuine fear replacing confusion. 4 times. He'd passed the same point 4 times. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned through nearly a quarter tank, which matched the distance his odometer claimed he'd traveled, over 60 miles. But according to the mile markers, he hadn't moved at all. He tried the CB again. "This is Nighthawk on Interstate 40. I need help. Something's wrong. Is anyone out there?" The static seemed to pulse, almost like breathing. Then that same distant voice. Can't leave, 112. "Who is this? What's happening?" "Stuck." "How long stuck?" The voice faded into static. Robert's hands were shaking. He checked his phone again, desperately hoping for a signal. Nothing. He thought about stopping, just parking and waiting for daylight, for another vehicle to come by. But what if nothing came? What if he was trapped in this loop forever? He drove on, watching the odometer tick upward, watching the landscape that should have been changing but wasn't. The same formations, the same road, the same mile marker. 5 times, 6 times, each passage adding another 15 to 20 miles to his odometer, while the mile markers insisted he was still at 112. On the 7th passage, something was different. There was a car pulled over on the shoulder, hazards flashing. A dark sedan, maybe 10 years old. Robert slowed, his heart pounding. Another vehicle meant he wasn't alone, meant this wasn't just in his head. He stopped his truck, climbed down, approached the car cautiously. The driver's side window was down. Inside, a woman sat behind the wheel, hands at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. She didn't acknowledge Robert's approach. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't move, didn't blink. Robert walked around to get a better angle, and his blood ran cold. Her eyes were open, but there was something wrong with them. They didn't reflect his flashlight, didn't react to the beam. Her skin had a waxy quality, like a mannequin. "Ma'am?" He reached out, hesitated, then touched her shoulder. She turned her head, the movement jerky and wrong. When she spoke, her mouth didn't quite match the words. "How long have I been here?" I don't know. Are you hurt?" "I stopped to check my map. That was Tuesday. What day is it now?" "It's Tuesday," Robert said, "October 11th, 2022. Her face crumpled and tears began to stream down her cheeks, but her expression didn't change. "It was Tuesday when I stopped. October 11th, 2017. Robert stumbled backward. 5 years. She'd been sitting here for 5 years in this loop, at this mile marker, unable to move forward or back. "We have to get out," he said. "Come on, leave the car, get in my truck." She shook her head, the movement still strange and mechanical. "I tried walking. You walk and you end up back at your car. I tried driving, same as you, around and around. I tried going east, same thing. I tried waiting, nobody comes. You're the first person I've seen in—" She paused. "I don't know how long. Time is wrong here." Robert's mind raced. There had to be a way out, some trick to breaking the loop. "What if we drive together? What if—" "I'm not real anymore," she interrupted. "Not really, I can feel it. I'm wearing away. Soon I'll be like the others." "Others?" She pointed past Robert's truck. He turned and saw them, more vehicles spaced out along the shoulder. A pickup truck, a van, another semi, all with drivers inside, all sitting motionless, all trapped at mile marker 112. Robert ran back to his truck. He had to try something different. He'd been maintaining speed, staying in his lane, following the rules. What if that was the trap? What if the road wanted you to follow its rules? He accelerated hard, pushing the truck faster than was safe, faster than regulations allowed. 70 miles per hour. 80. The engine roared, the whole rig shaking. He watched the mile markers flash by. 112, 112, 112, the numbers unchanging despite his speed. Then he did something desperate. He cranked the wheel hard right, taking the truck off the highway entirely. The rig bounced over rough ground, trailer fishtailing. Alarms blared from his dashboard. He didn't care. He drove into the darkness, into the scrubland, away from the road that wouldn't let him go. The truck crashed through sagebrush, over rocks, the suspension screaming. Robert held on, praying the trailer wouldn't jackknife, praying he wouldn't roll. He drove blind into the night, putting distance between himself and Interstate 40. Then suddenly, impossibly, he was back on the highway. Not on the shoulder, not climbing back up from the scrubland. He was in the westbound lane as if he'd never left. But the mile marker ahead read 123. Robert's breath came in gasps. He checked his mirrors. The highway behind him was empty. No rock formation, no trapped vehicles. His GPS flickered to life, showing his position clearly. His phone showed 2 bars of signal. He drove for another 50 miles before he trusted himself to stop. At a truck stop in Tucumcari, he sat in the parking lot until sunrise, shaking, unable to process what had happened. His logbook showed the time, showed the miles. Everything looked normal except for a 45-minute gap where he'd been trapped in the loop. Robert completed the delivery to Albuquerque. He filed his paperwork, said nothing about what happened. Who would believe him? But he never drove that stretch of Interstate 40 again. He started taking southern routes, adding hours to his trips, accepting the inefficiency. Sometimes late at night, when he's on a dark highway, he thinks about that woman in the car. 5 years trapped at mile marker 112. He wonders how long she'd last before she became like the others she'd mentioned, completely worn away by the loop, reduced to something less than a ghost. He wonders how many drivers are trapped there now, going around and around, burning fuel that never runs out, wearing down their odometers on miles that don't exist. And he wonders what would have happened if he hadn't taken that desperate drive into the darkness. Would he still be there at mile marker 112, watching himself pass by again and again, counting the loops until he forgot how to count at all? Story 2. The Phantom Dispatcher. Patricia Sullivan had driven for Midwest Freight Lines for 17 years, and in all that time she'd never questioned a dispatch order. The company was professional, organized, and their dispatchers knew what they were doing. That's why the call she received on a Friday night in March of 2023 didn't immediately raise red flags, even though it should have. She was parked at a rest stop off Interstate 94 in Minnesota, halfway through her mandatory 10-hour break. Her next load was scheduled for morning, a straightforward run of furniture from Minneapolis to Omaha. She'd been reviewing the route on her laptop when her phone rang, showing the company's main dispatch number. "Sullivan," she answered. "Patricia, this is dispatch. We need you to take an emergency run." The voice was professional, neutral, exactly like the dispatchers she'd worked with for years. But she didn't recognize this particular voice. "I'm still on my break. I've got 6 hours left on the clock. This is priority freight, Patricia. Client is paying triple rate and you're the closest driver. We need you to pick up in Moorhead and deliver to a facility in North Dakota. I'm sending the details to your tablet now." Patricia's tablet chimed. She pulled up the order, frowning. The pickup location was a warehouse she'd never heard of. The delivery address was just coordinates. No street address, no company name. The cargo was listed as specialized equipment, temperature controlled. "This doesn't look like our usual format," she said. "New client, new system, everything's legitimate. You'll be compensated for the interrupted break plus the premium rate. We need you rolling in 30 minutes. Patricia hesitated. Something felt off, but she couldn't pinpoint what. The order had all the right authentication codes, the company letterhead, everything official. And triple rate was triple rate. That would be a significant bonus. "All right," she said. "I'll need to hook up to a refrigerated trailer. There's a reefer unit at the pickup location. You'll do a swap there. 30 minutes, Patricia. Clock's running." The call ended. Patricia stared at her phone, then at the order on her tablet. She tried calling back the dispatch number, but it rang busy. That was odd. The company had multiple lines. She checked her email for confirmation. Nothing there, but the order was in the system on her tablet, which meant it had come through official channels. She started her truck and headed for Moorhead. The pickup location was on the outskirts, an industrial area she'd passed before but never stopped at. The GPS guided her through empty streets past warehouses that all looked the same in the darkness. She found the address, a nondescript building with a single security light over a loading dock. A refrigerated trailer sat in the lot, already loaded and sealed. No one was around. Patricia circled the building looking for an office, someone to give her the paperwork. Nothing. She checked her tablet. A new message said the bills of lading were in the trailer cab, already signed and sealed, just hook up and go. This was getting stranger, but the trailer was there, the load was ready, and she was now committed. Patricia backed her truck up to the reefer unit, connected the airlines and electrical, did her standard safety checks. Everything looked normal. The reefer was running, maintaining temperature at 38 degrees. She couldn't see inside the sealed container, but the manifest on her tablet listed the cargo as medical equipment. She pulled out of the lot and headed for the coordinates in North Dakota. The route took her northwest on Highway 75, away from the interstate, into increasingly rural territory. Small towns gave way to farmland, then to empty plains. Traffic disappeared entirely after the first hour. Patricia tried to raise dispatch on her phone. Voicemail. She tried the emergency line. Voicemail. She checked her tablet for messages. Nothing since the initial orders. The coordinates were still 90 miles ahead, deep in the middle of nowhere, according to her GPS. The highway narrowed to 2 lanes, then to barely maintained asphalt. Patricia's unease grew. This wasn't right. Legitimate deliveries didn't happen in the middle of nowhere with no communication. She thought about turning around, but she'd already driven 2 hours. The cargo was temperature sensitive. If it was real medical equipment, turning back could damage it. At mile marker 42, her GPS started acting strangely. The route line on the screen began to waver, showing her position shifting even though she was driving straight. The coordinates for the delivery point seemed to move, staying perpetually 50 miles ahead no matter how far she drove. Then her radio crackled to life, not the CB, her company radio that only worked on the corporate frequency. "Patricia Sullivan, do you copy?" She grabbed the handset. "This is Sullivan. Who is this?" "Dispatch. You're off route. You need to turn back immediately." "Turn back? You sent me on this run. I'm following the coordinates you gave me." "Negative. We have no record of this dispatch. We've been trying to reach you for 3 hours. Your truck's GPS shows you heading into a zone that's not on our approved route list." Patricia's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, no record? I have the order right here on my tablet, authenticated with company codes." "Check your tablet again, Patricia. Look at the order." She pulled over, grabbed the tablet. The order was still there, but something was different. The text was slightly corrupted, characters replaced with symbols she didn't recognize. The authentication codes, which had looked legitimate before, were now obviously wrong, strings of numbers that didn't match the company's format. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. "We don't know. But you need to turn around. That delivery location doesn't exist. You're heading into an area that's—" Patricia, 3 other drivers have disappeared, taking runs to that same coordinate point. We never sent those dispatches. Someone or something is using our system to lure drivers out there. Patricia's hands shook. "What about the cargo?" "Leave it. Unhook the trailer and get back to civilization. We're tracking your position now. State police are being notified." She looked at the reefer trailer in her mirrors, the unit humming steadily. What if there's really medical equipment inside? What if people need it? "Patricia, listen to me. 2 months ago, a driver named Marcus Chen took a dispatch just like yours. Same fake coordinates, same setup. Highway Patrol found his truck 3 days later, empty. He was gone. The trailer was empty too, even though the seal was intact. Whatever is doing this, it's not about delivering cargo." Patricia felt ice run down her spine. She reached for the trailer release, ready to unhook and abandon the reefer right there on the roadside. That's when she heard the knocking. It came from inside the trailer. Slow, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more knocks. "Dispatch, there's something inside the trailer. Get away from it, now!" But Patricia couldn't move. The knocking continued, methodical and patient. Then she heard something else. A voice muffled by the insulated walls. It was calling her name. "Patricia, help us. Patricia." She recognized that voice. Marcus Chen. The dispatcher had just mentioned his name, but she'd met him once at a company event. He'd been friendly, professional, excited about his upcoming retirement, and now his voice was coming from inside the trailer. "Marcus," she called out. "Patricia, it took us. It needs more. Don't deliver. Don't finish the route." The trailer began to shake, not from the reefer unit's vibration, but from something moving inside. Something large. Multiple somethings. Patricia ran for her truck cab, fired up the engine. The trailer releases were automatic. She could dump it from inside. She hit the control. Nothing happened. She hit it again. The trailer stayed connected, the pin locked in place. "Dispatch, I can't disconnect. Cut the airlines, cut the electrical, just go." Patricia jumped back out, grabbed the emergency knife from her door panel. She slashed through the airlines, cut the electrical cable. The reefer unit died, but the trailer didn't release. She looked at the kingpin. The mechanism was fused somehow, the metal warped and wrong. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the night. Then the entire trailer lurched backward, pulling at her truck. Something inside was shifting its weight deliberately. Patricia climbed back in the cab, threw the truck into gear, and drove. The trailer fought her every mile, the weight distribution wrong, pulling the truck sideways. Her mirrors showed the reefer swaying in ways that shouldn't be possible with a standard load. She drove back the way she'd come, watching for the turn onto Highway 75. But the road had changed. Intersections that she'd passed earlier were gone. Mile markers ran backward, 42, 41, 43, 39. They were out of sequence, wrong. "Dispatch, I'm lost. The roads are different." Static answered her. The company radio was dead. Patricia drove through the night, the trailer growing heavier behind her. She could feel it pulling at the truck, could hear things moving inside. Occasionally voices called out, drivers' names she didn't recognize, pleas for help, warnings to turn back. Dawn came slowly, the horizon lightening by degrees. As the sun broke over the plains, Patricia saw something ahead. Lights, buildings, the blessed sight of Interstate 94. She accelerated toward it, the trailer fighting her every foot. She crossed onto the interstate and immediately felt the difference. The trailer's weight normalized. The pulling sensation stopped. She looked in her mirrors and saw the reefer sitting properly, traveling smoothly. Patricia drove straight to the nearest truck stop, a major chain with dozens of vehicles and people everywhere. She backed into a spot, set her brakes, and sat shaking in the cab for 20 minutes before she could trust her legs to carry her. When she finally climbed down and checked the trailer, the kingpin was normal. The air lines and electrical cable were intact, not cut. The seal was still in place. She called her real dispatcher, explained everything. The company sent someone to pick up the trailer. They opened it with Patricia watching from a safe distance. Inside was empty except for a single object sitting in the middle of the floor. Her company ID badge. The one she'd been wearing around her neck all night. The one that was still around her neck. There were two of them. Identical down to the photo, the scratches on the laminate, the frayed edge of the lanyard. Patricia turned in her resignation the next day. She'd had enough of trucking, enough of long hauls, enough of strange dispatches in the night. She took a job in her hometown working in an office, never driving anything larger than her personal car. But sometimes her phone rings late at night showing her old company's dispatch number. When she answers, there's only breathing on the line and a faint mechanical hum, like a reefer unit running in the distance. And a voice, barely audible, asking if she's available for a priority run. Triple rate, just need her rolling in 30 minutes. She always hangs up. She's changed her number 4 times, but the calls still come. And sometimes she wonders about Marcus Chen and the other drivers. If they're still in that trailer, wherever it really is, still knocking, still calling out names, still trying to warn the next driver not to finish the route. Story 3. The Midnight Way Station. James Cooper had a simple rule for his 21 years of trucking. Follow every TUL regulation, skip no required stops, maintain perfect logs. That meticulous adherence to rules had kept his record clean, his insurance low, and his reputation solid. So when he approached the way station on Highway 285 in New Mexico at 1 in the morning in August of 2021, he didn't hesitate to pull in, even though the place gave him an immediate sense of wrongness. The way station appeared suddenly in his headlights, the signs commanding all commercial vehicles to enter. James couldn't remember seeing it on this route before, and he'd driven 285 dozens of times. But regulations were regulations, and an open way station meant compliance was mandatory. He pulled onto the scale, watching the lights. Usually the process was automated. Drive on, wait for the green light, drive off. This station was different. The scale house lights were on, and a figure stood in the window waving him forward off the scale and directing him to park in the inspection bay. James parked and waited. The inspection bay was covered, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Through his mirrors, he watched the figure approach from the scale house. The man wore what looked like a DOT inspector's uniform, complete with vest and clipboard, but something about his movements was off. Too smooth, too deliberate. The inspector knocked on James's door. James rolled down the window. "Evening driver, license, registration, and current logs, please." James handed over the documents. The inspector studied them, his face expressionless. In the harsh fluorescent light, his skin looked waxy, artificial. James Cooper, 21 years experience, clean record. The inspector's voice was flat, emotionless. "You're carrying electronics, Los Angeles to Denver." "That's correct." "I'll need to inspect your cargo." This wasn't unusual, but James felt his unease grow. The inspector hadn't checked his vehicle number, hadn't asked about his cargo weight or distribution, hadn't done any of the standard verification procedures. "Can I see your credentials?" James asked. The inspector reached into his vest and pulled out an ID card. It looked official enough. Dot seal, photograph, name reading Inspector F. Morrison. But the photo showed the same waxy, expressionless face that was looking at James now. "Open your trailer, please." James climbed down and walked to the back of his rig, the inspector following. The inspection bay was silent except for the hum of the lights. James realized he couldn't hear any traffic from the highway. Couldn't hear anything at all except his own footsteps and breathing. He broke the seal, opened the doors. The cargo was secure. Pallets of boxed electronics, properly strapped and distributed. The inspector climbed into the trailer, moving between the pallets with his flashlight. "This cargo isn't correct," he said. "Excuse me? These boxes, they don't contain what the manifest says." James frowned. He'd loaded the trailer himself at the distribution center, verified every pallet. "I watched them load it. Everything matches the paperwork." The inspector pulled a box knife from his belt. Before James could object, he slid open one of the boxes. Inside was packing material and nothing. The box was empty. "Sir, The inspector opened another box. Empty. Another. Empty. James's mind raced. This was impossible. He'd seen the boxes being loaded, had helped verify the count and weight. The total cargo weight matched his scale ticket from the origin. There was no way these boxes were empty. "You're transporting false cargo," the inspector said. "That's a violation of federal regulations. I'm placing your vehicle out of service." "Wait, there has to be a mistake. Let me check." "Out of service means out of service, Mr. Cooper. You'll need to wait here while I process the violation and arrange for investigation." The inspector walked back toward the scale house, taking James's documents with him. James stared at the open boxes, his mind trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He grabbed one of the supposedly empty boxes, felt its weight. It was heavy, as if full. But when he looked inside, there was nothing. He pulled out his phone to call his dispatcher. No signal. He walked to the edge of the inspection bay, looking for the highway. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was no highway. The inspection bay opened onto empty darkness, not the road he'd driven in on. No signs, no pavement, no lights in the distance. Just absolute blackness, like looking into a void. James walked back to where he'd entered the station. The entrance ramp was gone, replaced by a concrete wall. The wall was solid, real, covered in years of grime and wear. It couldn't have just appeared, but he'd driven through this space minutes ago. "What the hell is this?" he said aloud. "This is a compliance checkpoint." The inspector's voice came from behind him. James spun around. The inspector stood 10 feet away, though James hadn't heard him approach. "All drivers must comply." "Comply with what?" "This isn't a real way station. That cargo was full. The highway is gone." "The cargo is what we determine it to be. The regulations are what we say they are. You will comply." James backed away, his heart pounding. "I want to leave. I'm taking my truck and leaving. Your vehicle is out of service. You cannot leave. You can't keep me here. I have rights." The inspector's face didn't change expression, but something shifted in his posture. "You chose to stop, Mr. Cooper. You chose to comply. You brought yourself here." "The signs said I had to stop." "Did they? Or did you stop because you always stop? Because following rules matters more to you than anything else?" James felt sick. He'd pulled in without thinking, without questioning, because that's what he always did. Follow the rules. Obey the signs. Stay compliant. "Let me go," he said. "Complete your inspection first. We have more violations to document." The inspector turned back toward the trailer. James made a decision. He ran for his truck, jumped in the cab, fired up the engine. The trailer doors were still open, cargo exposed, but he didn't care. He'd ram through that concrete wall if he had to. He threw the truck into gear and aimed for where the entrance had been. The wall rushed toward him, solid and immovable. James closed his eyes, foot hard on the accelerator. The impact never came. The truck surged forward, and suddenly James was on the highway, 285 stretching ahead in his headlights. He checked his mirrors. The way station was gone. Just dark highway behind him. His trailer doors were closed and sealed. His cargo paperwork sat on the passenger seat where he'd left it, undisturbed. According to his dashboard clock, no time had passed. It was still 1 in the morning, the same minute he'd seen the way station signs. James drove straight through to Denver without stopping, his hands shaking on the wheel. At the delivery point, they unloaded his cargo. Every box was full, exactly as manifested. The seal he'd broken in the inspection bay was intact, the seal number matching his paperwork. He filed his reports, said nothing about what happened. But he changed his practices. Now when he approaches a way station, he checks his GPS first, verifies it's a known, documented station. He looks for other trucks, for DOT vehicles, for signs of legitimate operation. If something feels wrong, if the station appears too suddenly or seems too empty, he calls state police first. Most drivers would say you can't skip a way station if the signs say to enter. But James Cooper knows different now. Some signs aren't real regulations. Some stations aren't part of the real highway system, and some inspectors aren't checking for compliance with federal laws. They're checking for something else entirely, testing whether you'll follow orders without question, whether you'll accept what they tell you over what your own senses say is true, whether you'll stay compliant even when compliance means disappearing into the dark. James passed that test by breaking it, by choosing escape over rules. But he wonders about the other drivers, the ones who stayed compliant, who accepted the violations, who waited in the inspection bay for the investigation that would never come. He wonders how many trucks are still parked there in that space between the real highway and the darkness, their drivers still waiting for permission to leave. And he wonders what would have happened if he'd stayed. If he'd let the inspector finish documenting violations. If he'd accepted the out-of-service order, if he'd waited. Would he still be there in the bay with the humming fluorescent lights, watching the inspector open box after box, finding them all empty, finding more and more violations in cargo that existed and didn't exist at the same time? He doesn't want to know. But sometimes when he's driving late at night, he sees way station signs that don't match his GPS, stations that appear in places where there should be nothing. And he drives past them, ignoring the regulatory requirement, breaking the rules that kept him safe for 21 years. Because he learned something in that midnight way station. Some rules aren't designed to protect you. Some rules are designed to trap you. And knowing the difference might be the only thing that keeps you on the real highway, in the real world, instead of lost forever in a compliance checkpoint that exists outside of time and space. Story 4. The cargo that wasn't there. Daniel Reeves didn't believe in curses or supernatural nonsense. In his 15 years hauling freight across the western states, he'd heard every truck stop legend, every ghost story, every tale of haunted highways and cursed loads. They were entertainment, nothing more. Stories bored drivers told each other to pass the time. That certainty lasted until he picked up a load in Portland, Oregon on a rainy Tuesday in November of 2022. The pickup was at a storage facility on the industrial outskirts. One of those anonymous warehouse complexes that all look identical. The manifest said he was hauling estate items, furniture, boxes, personal effects from a property liquidation. The destination was a storage facility in Boise, Idaho. Straightforward enough except for one detail. The customer was paying premium rates for a load that would normally go for standard freight charges. Why the rush? Daniel asked the facility manager, a thin man in his 60s who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Client wants it out of here. Been in storage for 8 months, rent's overdue. They finally agreed to move it. The manager's hands shook as he handed over the paperwork. You're the 5th driver they've sent. What happened to the other 4? They refused the load. Took one look and drove off? The manager wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. You seem like a no-nonsense guy. You'll be fine. Daniel should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why 4 experienced drivers had refused a simple furniture haul. But the premium rate was significant, and he'd hauled estate items before without issue. Dead people's belongings didn't bother him. The storage unit was at the back of the complex, number 317. The manager unlocked it and immediately stepped back, gesturing for Daniel to look inside without entering. The unit was full of furniture and boxes exactly as manifested. Everything looked normal. A couch, chairs, dining table, lamps, sealed cardboard boxes of various sizes. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make a driver refuse the load. Except for the smell. Faint but distinct. Like old flowers and something underneath that Daniel couldn't identify. Decay, but not quite. Sweet and wrong. The previous owner? Daniel asked. How'd they die? No one died. Woman just left. Stopped paying rent 8 months ago, stopped returning calls. Facility finally got legal permission to liquidate. That's all I know. Daniel loaded the furniture in boxes, doing his standard cargo securing. Everything seemed normal during loading, though that smell persisted. Once everything was loaded and strapped down, he closed the trailer doors, glad to seal the odor inside. He pulled out of Portland at 4 in the afternoon, planning to make Boise by morning. The route was simple. Interstate 84 east, straight shot through the Columbia River Gorge and into Idaho. He'd driven it hundreds of times. The first strange thing happened an hour into the drive. Daniel heard movement in the trailer. Not the shifting of poorly secured cargo, but distinct sounds. Footsteps, something being dragged, what might have been furniture being rearranged. He pulled over at the first opportunity and opened the trailer. Everything was exactly as he'd loaded it. Nothing had shifted. Nothing was loose. The straps were tight, the boxes stacked properly. But that smell was stronger, and now there was something else. Cold air flowing from the trailer despite the insulation. Not refrigerated cold, but the kind of cold that comes from somewhere that's been dark for a long time. Daniel closed the doors and continued driving. Maybe the straps had creaked. Maybe he'd heard the suspension settling. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't explain. The sun set as he drove through the gorge, darkness filling the canyon. His CB radio crackled occasionally with other drivers' chatter, but the conversations seemed to fade in and out, as if his reception was fluctuating. Then his own CB came to life without him pressing the transmit button. "Driver," the voice was female, distorted by static. "Driver, where are you taking my things?" Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. Someone was pranking him, had to be. Another driver who saw his truck having fun with the new guy. "This is Reeves," he said into the CB. "Identify yourself." "Those are my things, in your trailer. Where are you taking them?" "Ma'am, this is a commercial frequency. Clear the channel." "I didn't leave. I'm still here. You have to take me back." The voice dissolved into static. Daniel checked his CB. The channel was clear, no other transmissions. He switched channels, heard normal chatter, switched back to his original channel. Silence. He was 50 miles from Hood River when the headlights of his truck began to dim. Not failing completely, just gradually getting weaker, as if something was draining power from his electrical system. His dashboard lights flickered. The radio went dead. His phone screen went black even though it had been fully charged. Daniel pulled over, hazards barely visible in the darkness. He grabbed his flashlight, climbed out, and opened the hood. The battery terminals were clean, the connections solid. Nothing obviously wrong. But his flashlight began to dim too, the beam weakening until he was left in near total darkness. That's when he heard it clearly. A woman's voice from inside the trailer, not distorted by radio static this time. She was crying, calling out, begging someone not to leave her. Daniel walked to the trailer doors, his mechanic's flashlight now providing barely enough light to see. His hands were shaking. He didn't want to open those doors, didn't want to see what was inside, but he had to know. He broke the seal, threw open the doors. The trailer was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, no cargo at all. Just bare walls and that smell overwhelming now, flooding out into the night. But the trailer felt heavy. His truck's rear suspension was compressed as if fully loaded. The weight was there even though nothing was visible. "Bring me back." The woman's voice came from inside the empty trailer, echoing in a space that should have been too small for echoes. "I'm still in the house. I never left. Bring me back." Daniel slammed the doors shut and ran for his cab. He didn't care about the cargo, didn't care about the delivery. He was driving straight through to Boise and dumping this trailer at the destination facility, and then he was never thinking about this load again. He drove hard through the night, his electrical system slowly coming back to life. By the time he reached Baker City, his lights were normal, his phone was working, his radio functioned. The sounds from the trailer had stopped. Maybe it was over. Maybe he'd imagined the worst of it. At a truck stop in Ontario, Oregon, just before the Idaho border, Daniel stopped for fuel. While the tank filled, he walked back to check the trailer. Through the gap under the doors, he could see the cargo was back. Furniture and boxes visible in the narrow space. Everything solid and real again. He delivered to Boise at 8 in the morning. The receiving facility unloaded the trailer and Daniel watched every piece come out. Normal furniture. Normal boxes. The receiving clerk signed off on the delivery, noted no damage, no issues. "Any problems with the load?" the clerk asked. Daniel shook his head. What would he say? That the cargo had disappeared and the trailer had carried the ghost of someone who'd never actually died? That he'd hauled 800 miles of nothing that weighed several thousand pounds? He took his paperwork and left, but as he was pulling away from the facility, his CB crackled one more time. "Thank you for bringing me here." The woman's voice, clear and calm now. "But I'm not staying. I never stay." Daniel looked in his mirror at the empty trailer he was pulling. The trailer that should have been left at the facility, but when he'd hooked up to leave, he'd somehow connected to the same trailer he'd delivered. The same number, the same unit. It was empty now, but it was following him. He stopped, disconnected, verified the trailer was the one he'd delivered. The facility confirmed, yes, that trailer, they'd just unloaded it. But here it was, hooked to his truck as if he'd never dropped it. Daniel spent 3 hours at that facility trying to explain, trying to get them to take the trailer back. They insisted they had it. It was in their yard, unloaded and empty. But Daniel could see it behind his truck, could feel its weight on his fifth wheel. Finally, he gave up and drove away, the ghost trailer following. He stopped at a state police way station and asked them to verify what he was pulling. They looked at his truck and told him he wasn't pulling anything. He was just a bobtail, no trailer attached. But Daniel could feel it, could see it in his mirrors, could hear occasional sounds from inside, and when he checked his fuel consumption, his truck was burning diesel at the rate of pulling a full load. He drove back to Portland and went to the storage facility. The manager took one look at him and nodded, unsurprised. "She won't leave," the manager said. "That's why they wanted it moved. But moving it doesn't work. She's attached to those things, and now she's attached to you. How do I get rid of it?" The other drivers who refused, they could see her, standing in the storage unit between the furniture. She'd been there for months and she's not leaving. The woman who rented the unit, she's not dead. She's in a psychiatric facility in Eugene, has been for a year. Kept saying she had to stay with her things, couldn't leave them, they were the only real part of her life. Eventually she stopped eating, stopped drinking. just sat with her belongings until they hospitalized her. But she's alive. Her body's alive, but something else that stayed with the furniture. Daniel ended up donating the trailer to a salvage yard, abandoning it in a far corner of their lot. He told his company it had been stolen, paid the deductible on the insurance. He couldn't explain what had really happened. But sometimes when he's driving, particularly on night runs through Oregon, he sees that trailer in his mirrors. Hooked up to his fifth wheel following him, full of cargo that exists and doesn't exist. And he hears that voice on his CB, asking where he's taking her things, begging to go back, thanking him for bringing her along. Daniel doesn't haul estate items anymore. Doesn't take loads from storage facilities. Doesn't drive through Portland if he can avoid it. Because he learned something on that run. Some cargo isn't just objects. Some loads carry the weight of someone's whole identity, their whole reality compressed into furniture and boxes. And if they put enough of themselves into those things, they don't let go. Even when they're still alive somewhere else, the part that mattered most stays with the cargo. Riding in the trailer, moving when you're not looking, calling out on the radio, following you from delivery to delivery, never quite unloaded, never quite gone. Story 5. The Backwards Rest Stop. Michelle Torres had been a long-haul trucker for 19 years, and she'd developed a sixth sense for rest stops. She could tell which ones were safe, which attracted lot lizards, which had questionable plumbing. But she'd never encountered anything like the rest stop that appeared on Interstate 15 between Las Vegas and Salt Lake City on a Friday night in April of 2023. She'd been driving for 9 hours, hauling industrial equipment from Los Angeles to Denver. She was tired, but not dangerously so, still within her hours of service. But fatigue was creeping in, and she'd learned to trust her body's signals. When she saw the rest stop sign, 2 miles ahead, she decided to pull off for a quick 30-minute break. The rest stop looked standard as she pulled in. Parking lot with spaces for both cars and trucks, a restroom building, picnic areas, the usual highway amenities. A few other vehicles were parked there, including 2 other semis. Normal enough that Michelle didn't hesitate to park and shut down her engine. The first odd thing was the silence. Rest stops were never truly quiet. There was always wind, distant traffic, the sounds of other vehicles. But when Michelle opened her door, she stepped into absolute silence. No highway noise at all, despite being right next to Interstate 15. She looked back at the highway. Traffic was moving, headlights flowing past in both directions. But there was no sound. It was like watching a movie with the volume off. Michelle walked toward the restroom building, her boots loud on the pavement, the only sound in the strange quiet. The building looked normal, standard construction, lights on inside. But as she got closer, she noticed something wrong with the signage. The words were backward, mirror reversed. Not just the letters flipped, but the entire layout, as if someone had photographed the signs and flipped the image. She pushed open the door, or tried to. It opened the wrong way, hinges on the opposite side from where they should be. Inside, the layout was reversed, sinks on the left instead of right, stalls positioned backward, everything a mirror image of a normal rest stop bathroom. Michelle backed out, her heart starting to race. This was wrong. She looked at the other vehicles in the lot. The 2 other semis, the cars, they were all normal. Or were they? She walked closer to one of the trucks, looked at the driver's side. The door was on the right. The driver's position was reversed. Every vehicle in the lot was backward. Built mirror image as if manufactured in some reverse world. She pulled out her phone to call for help. The screen was backward too, all the icons and text reversed. When she tried to swipe, her finger moved right, but the screen responded as if she'd swiped left. She tried to dial 911, but the numbers on the keypad were flipped. Michelle walked back toward her truck, moving faster now. She needed to get out of here, back on the highway, back to normal space. But when she reached where she'd parked, her truck was gone. In its place was a truck that looked similar, same company logo, same trailer, but reversed. The driver's door on the wrong side, the company name backward on the trailer. She ran to the truck, tried the door. It was locked. She didn't have the keys, they were in her pocket, but when she pulled them out, they looked wrong. The teeth were on the opposite side, the key ring backward. You stopped in the wrong place. Michelle spun around. A man stood behind her wearing a highway maintenance uniform. But like everything else, his uniform was backward. Buttons on the wrong side, patches reversed, even his wedding ring on the right hand instead of left. "Where am I?" Michelle asked. "The rest stop. Same one you pulled into, just the other side of it." "What other side?" "Most people don't notice the signs, the ones that tell you which rest stop you're entering. This one's marked, but most drivers don't read carefully. They just see rest area 1 mile and pull off. But there are 2 rest areas at this exit. One for the world moving forward, one for the world moving backward." Michelle's head spun. "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't it? You've been driving forward all day, miles rolling under your wheels, time moving ahead. But time and space aren't one-way streets. They can flow backward too. This rest stop serves the vehicles traveling that direction. Backward through time, through space. You stopped here, so now you're part of that flow. I want to leave. You can. But when you do, you'll be going the wrong way. Backward from where you came. You'll undrive every mile you covered today, unlive every hour, moving in reverse back to where you started." Michelle looked at the highway. The traffic was still moving, headlights flowing past. But now she could see it clearly. The vehicles were moving backward, cars and trucks sliding in reverse, yet somehow their forward lights were visible. Or were they backward lights? In this place, which way was forward? "There has to be a way back to normal," she said. The maintenance man shrugged. "Sure, you can wait here until another driver from your side stops. When they leave, you can follow them out. Their momentum, their forward-moving time, it can pull you back into the normal flow." "How long will that take?" "However long it takes, time moves different here. Could be minutes, could be days, hard to tell." Michelle walked to the edge of the rest stop, looking at the highway. She could see vehicles pulling off at the exit, but they were going to a different rest stop. The normal one, the forward one. They couldn't see this place. She tried walking toward the exit ramp, thinking she could just walk back to the highway. But the more she walked, the farther away the exit seemed to get. Space was wrong here, distances broken. She walked for what felt like an hour and made no progress. Finally, exhausted and terrified, she sat on a curb and waited. The maintenance man had disappeared. The other vehicles in the lot sat empty. Their backward drivers somewhere else, maybe in the restroom, maybe vanished entirely. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Michelle couldn't tell. Her phone didn't work properly, the time displayed counting backward and forward randomly. Her watch had stopped. The sky didn't change, stuck in the same twilight darkness it had been when she'd arrived. Then she heard an engine. A truck pulled into the lot, and Michelle's heart leaped. It was a normal truck, driver's door on the correct side, everything forward-facing. The driver got out, a woman about Michelle's age, stretching and yawning, heading for the restroom. Michelle ran to her. "Don't go in there, we need to leave." The woman looked startled. "What's wrong?" "This place is wrong, it's backward, we need to get back on the highway now." "Lady, I just need to use the bathroom." "Look at your truck, look at mine, look at everything here." The woman looked around, and Michelle saw the moment she noticed. The confusion, then fear crossing her face as she saw the backward signs, the reversed vehicles, the wrong-way doors. "What the hell?" "I don't know, but we can leave if we go together. Your truck is still normal, still part of the forward world. We can follow you out." They ran to the other woman's truck. Michelle climbed in, and they pulled out of the rest stop, accelerating hard toward the exit. Michelle watched in the mirrors as the backward rest stop faded behind them. They merged onto the highway, and suddenly sound returned, the roar of wind, of traffic, of the normal world. "Thank you," Michelle said. "You saved me." The woman was shaking. "What was that place?" "I don't know, but I'm never stopping there again." The woman dropped Michelle at the next rest stop, the normal one, forward-facing. Michelle called her company, reported her truck stolen, couldn't explain what had really happened. They eventually found it at the backward rest stop, or at least that's what the recovery company said. But when they delivered it back to her, it was wrong. Subtle things, the odometer running backward, the fuel gauge decreasing when she filled up, the radio playing songs from the end to the beginning. Michelle had the truck scrapped, couldn't drive it anymore. Every time she got in, she felt like she was moving backward, undoing her progress, reversing through time. She got a new truck, a new trailer, started fresh. But she's careful about rest stops now. She reads the signs carefully, checks for anything, reversed or wrong. She never stops at the rest area on Interstate 15 between Vegas and Salt Lake, always pushes through even when she's tired. Because she knows that place is still there on the other side of normal space. The backward rest stop serving vehicles traveling in reverse through time. And she knows that some of the trucks in that lot have been there for years, their drivers waiting for someone from the forward world to stop and provide an exit. She wonders how many drivers are there now, sitting in that eternal twilight, watching vehicles flow backward on the highway, waiting. And she wonders what would have happened if that other driver hadn't stopped. If she'd been stuck there, would she have eventually given up and gotten in one of the backward trucks? Started driving in reverse, unmaking her route, growing younger with each mile until she reached some impossible origin point? She doesn't want to know. Some questions don't need answers. Some rest stops don't need to be explored, and some directions of time and space are better left untraveled. Story 6. The Static Call. Leonard Walsh was driving through Montana on Interstate 90 in September of 2022 when his CB radio picked up a call that shouldn't have been possible. Leonard had 26 years of trucking experience, and he knew CB radio technology inside and out. He knew the range limitations, the channel protocols, the way signals degraded over distance. What came through his radio that night violated every one of those principles. It was 2 a.m, the highway empty except for the occasional passing vehicle. Leonard was hauling lumber from Missoula to Billings, a route he'd driven countless times. He kept his CB on Channel 19, the standard driver channel, mostly for weather updates and traffic warnings. The radio had been quiet for the last hour, just the soft hiss of static. Then it crackled to life. "Anyone copy? This is Freight Line 734. I need help. Can anyone hear me?" The voice was distant, broken by static, but the fear in it was clear. Leonard grabbed his handset. "This is Nightshade on I-90. I copy you, Freight Line 734. What's your location?" "I don't know. The highway is wrong. The mile markers keep repeating. I've been driving for hours, but I'm not getting anywhere." Leonard felt a chill. "What's your last known position?" "I was on I-90 westbound, somewhere in Montana. But now, nothing looks right. The road goes on forever. There are no exits, no other vehicles, just road and darkness. Can you give me a mile marker?" Static then. "Says mile marker 142. But I've passed it 3 times now. Wait, 4 times. I'm passing it again." Leonard checked his GPS. He was approaching mile marker 170. Mile marker 142 was about 30 miles behind him. CB radio had a range of maybe 5 miles, 10 if conditions were perfect. There was no way he should be receiving this clearly from that distance. "Freight Line, what's your rig look like? What are you hauling?" "White Peterbilt, pulling a reefer unit. Cargo is produce, perishable. I need to get to Spokane, but I can't find the right road. Okay, stay calm. Try pulling over, see if you can get a phone signal, call dispatch. I tried. No signal, phone's dead. GPS is frozen. Only thing working is the CB, and you're the first person who's answered. Leonard thought fast. What company are you driving for? Mountain West Logistics. Leonard knew Mountain West. They were a regional carrier, legitimate outfit. Freight line, I'm going to report your position to authorities, get you some help. What's your name? Carson. Thomas Carson. Okay, Thomas, I'm going to help you. Just keep... The transmission cut off. Leonard tried calling back. Freight line 734, this is Nightshade. Do you copy? Silence. He tried several more times, then grabbed his phone and called Highway Patrol. He reported a driver in distress, gave them the details. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but said they'd check it out. Leonard continued driving, troubled. Something about that call felt wrong beyond just the technical impossibility of the range. The driver had sounded genuinely terrified, but also distant, not just in signal, but in some other way. Like he was calling from somewhere other than just 30 miles away. 20 minutes later, the CB crackled again. Nightshade, this is Freight Line. Are you still there? I'm here, Thomas. Highway Patrol is looking for you. I saw lights behind me. I thought it was help, but... The fear in Carson's voice intensified. They're not right. The lights are the wrong color. Blue but too bright, like they're burning, and they're getting closer. Are they police lights? I don't know. They don't flash like police lights. They just pulse. And there's a sound with them. Low hum, like... Static drowned out the rest. Leonard tried to respond, got no answer. He checked his position. He was now passing mile marker 190. Carson had said he was at 142, but that was nearly an hour ago. Even if Carson hadn't moved at all, Leonard should have passed him by now. The CB came back. Following me. Whatever has those lights, it's keeping pace. I've accelerated to 80 and it stays right behind me. Not gaining, not falling back. Just there. Thomas, can you describe the vehicle? Can't see it, just the lights. They're so bright they wash out everything in my mirrors, but I don't think it's a vehicle. The lights are too high off the ground and the way they move. They're not attached to anything solid. Leonard's hands tightened on his wheel. This was getting into territory he didn't want to believe in. Thomas, I want you to try something. At your next exit, take it. Get off the interstate. There are no exits. I told you the road just goes on. I haven't seen an exit in over an hour. That was impossible. Interstate 90 had exits every 10 to 15 miles through this section. Leonard had passed 2 since the first call. Thomas, what mile marker are you at now? Still 142. I keep passing it over and over. Leonard's mind raced. He'd heard stories, truck stop legends about loops and time distortions. He'd always dismissed them. But if those stories had any truth... Thomas, listen carefully. The next time you pass mile marker 142, I want you to pull over. Stop your truck. Don't keep driving. But the lights... I know, but you're not making progress anyway. If you're in some kind of loop, moving forward isn't helping. Try stopping. Silence for a long moment. Then, okay, I'll try. Marker coming up now. I'm pulling over. Static. Leonard waited, counting seconds. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Thomas, did you stop? I stopped. The lights stopped too. They're just sitting there about 50 yards behind me, pulsing. Can you see anything now? Anything about what's making the lights? No. It's like they're floating in the air. And that sound is louder now. It's making my head hurt, making it hard to think. Thomas, stay with me. I'm going to turn around, come back to mile marker 142. I'll find you. Don't come back here. Something's wrong with this place. It's not... The transmission cut off completely, not static, not fading, just instant silence like someone had thrown a switch. Leonard tried calling back. Nothing. He switched channels, broadcasting on every frequency, no response. He called Highway Patrol again, told them the situation had escalated. They said they'd been checking the area around mile marker 142 and found nothing. No stopped trucks, no distressed drivers, no unusual lights. Leonard made a decision. He took the next exit, turned around, and headed back east. He needed to see mile marker 142 for himself. If Thomas Carson was there, Leonard would find him. He drove back, watching his GPS, watching the mile markers count down, 190, 180, 170. The highway was empty, not another vehicle in sight. 160, 150, getting close now. Mile marker 142 appeared in his headlights. Leonard slowed, scanning both sides of the road. Nothing. No truck, no lights, no sign anyone had stopped here. He pulled over, got out, looked around. The night was quiet, normal. Just highway and darkness. He got back in his truck and continued west. Maybe Carson had gotten free of whatever had trapped him. Maybe he'd made it to Spokane. But at mile marker 145, his CB crackled. "Nightshade? Are you there? This is Freightline." Leonard grabbed the handset. "Thomas, where are you?" "I don't know. I'm still driving, still on I-90, but everything's different. Now, the lights are gone. The loop is broken, but I'm not in Montana anymore." "Where are you?" "That's just it. I don't know. The highway looks the same, but it's wrong. The signs are there, but they're for places that don't exist. Towns I've never heard of. And when I look to the sides of the road, I can see things." "What things?" "Roads. Hundreds of them, thousands, running parallel to this one, all at slightly different angles. And there are trucks on them, drivers like me, all moving forward, all separate. It's like the highway splits into infinite versions, and I can see all of them now." Leonard felt cold. "Thomas, try to get back to the main highway, the real one." "Which one's real?" "They all look real, and every time I blink I'm on a different version. The mile markers change. The landscape shifts. I'm moving between them, jumping from highway to highway. Thomas, I have to go, I have to choose. I can see exits now, but they lead to different worlds. Different versions of Montana, different versions of everywhere. I have to pick one and hope it leads somewhere I can exist." "Thomas, wait. Thank you for trying to help. But I don't think I'm coming back to your highway. Tell my family. Tell them I kept driving. Tell them I'm still out here, making deliveries somewhere." The transmission ended. Leonard tried calling back, got no response. He sat on the shoulder of Interstate 90, staring at his CB radio, wondering what had just happened. Over the following weeks, Leonard did research. He contacted Mountain West Logistics. They had a driver named Thomas Carson. He'd been reported missing 3 months before Leonard's encounter. Vanished somewhere on Interstate 90 between Missoula and Spokane. Truck and cargo never found. 3 months before, not during. Carson had been missing for months when Leonard received his call. Leonard still drives the same routes, still keeps his CB on Channel 19. But now he listens differently. Because sometimes in the dead of night on empty highways, he hears other voices. Drivers calling for help, reporting impossible situations, asking for directions to places that don't exist. And Leonard wonders, how many highways are there really? How many versions of Interstate 90 run through Montana, all parallel, all invisible to each other except through the strange accident of CB radio signals bleeding across dimensions? How many drivers are out there, lost on alternate roads, seeing the infinite splits and branches that the highway can take? He wonders if Thomas Carson found his way to a version of reality where he could stop, deliver his load, go home. Or if he's still driving, still jumping from highway to highway, still trying to find the exit that leads back to the world he knew. And Leonard wonders what would happen if he encountered the same phenomenon. If his highway suddenly revealed all its parallel versions, if he found himself slipping between them, would he be able to find his way back? Or would he become another voice on the CB calling out to drivers who can hear but not help? He doesn't want to find out. But every time he drives I-90 through Montana, passing mile marker 142, he checks his mirrors for strange lights, watches for signs of the road splitting, branching, multiplying, and keeps his CB ready just in case someone calls from the other highways, the ones that run alongside ours but shouldn't be possible to reach. Because if it happened to Thomas Carson, it could happen to anyone. All it takes is the wrong moment, the wrong mile marker, the wrong alignment of time and space, and suddenly you're not on the highway you started on. You're on one of the others, one of the infinite parallel roads that exist just beyond the edge of normal reality. And maybe, if you're lucky, you can call for help on the CB. But help can't reach you when you're on a different highway, in a different version of the world. All they can do is listen as you describe the impossible, and wonder which highway is the real one after all. Story 7. The Delivery to Nowhere. Catherine Moore had been driving for transcontinental freight for 14 years when she received a delivery assignment that would make her question everything she thought she knew about geography and reality. It came through normal channels on a Wednesday afternoon in June of 2021, a pickup in Reno, Nevada, delivery to a location in Northern California. Nothing unusual about the manifest, the cargo, or the distance. Everything looked routine until she checked the delivery coordinates. The GPS showed the location, but when Catherine zoomed in on the map, there was nothing there. No building, no town, no road, just empty terrain in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountains. She called dispatch to verify. "Yeah, those coordinates are correct," the dispatcher confirmed. "It's a private facility. They do research or something. Very hush-hush. They requested you specifically." "Requested me? Why?" "Didn't say, but they're paying premium rates and want delivery by tomorrow morning. Can you take it?" Catherine hesitated. Something felt off, but she'd delivered to remote locations before. Mining operations, research stations, wealthy landowners with property in the middle of nowhere. "What's the cargo?" "Sealed containers. Manifest says testing equipment. Climate-controlled, handle with care, standard stuff." "All right, I'll take it." The pickup was straightforward. A warehouse in Reno, 6 sealed containers, each about 4 feet by 3 feet, loaded onto her refrigerated trailer. The containers were made of brushed metal with no markings, no labels, nothing to indicate what was inside. Each had a small digital readout showing internal temperature and a warning: "Do not open, do not X-ray, maintain temperature at 36 to 38 degrees." Catherine secured the cargo and headed west on Interstate 80, planning to cut north on Highway 89 once she got into the mountains. The delivery coordinates would take her off the main highways onto forestry roads deep into wilderness. She'd driven worse routes. The trouble started when she turned off 89 onto what her GPS claimed was a county road. The pavement quickly degraded to gravel, then to dirt. Trees pressed in on both sides, thick pine forest that blocked most of the sky. Her GPS showed she was on course, but there were no signs, no markers, nothing to indicate this was an actual road rather than an old logging trail. She'd been driving for an hour on the deteriorating road when the GPS showed she was approaching the delivery location. Catherine slowed, looking for any sign of a facility. Nothing. Just trees, rocks, and rough terrain. According to her GPS, she was within a quarter mile of the coordinates. Then the trees opened up and she saw it. A gate. Not a fancy installation, just a simple chain-link barrier across the road with a keypad mounted on a post. No signs, no company name, nothing identifying what lay beyond. Catherine stopped and checked her paperwork. There was a code for the gate. 6 digits. She entered them into the keypad. The gate swung open smoothly, well maintained despite the remote location. Beyond the gate, the road improved dramatically. Suddenly it was paved again, smooth asphalt cutting through the forest. Catherine drove forward and the gate closed behind her. No turning back now without the code to get out. The road curved through the trees for another 10 minutes, then the forest opened up to reveal a facility. It was modern, concrete and glass, completely at odds with the wilderness setting. About the size of a large warehouse with a loading dock and several smaller structures nearby. But there were no windows on the main building, no signs, no vehicles visible. Catherine backed her truck up to the loading dock and climbed down. The place was silent except for forest sounds, wind in the trees, birds calling, no machinery noise, no people. The loading dock door was closed. She knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. She checked her phone. No signal, unsurprising out here. She walked around the building looking for another entrance, looking for anyone. Then she heard it, a voice from behind her. "Catherine Moore?" She spun around. A man stood there, appearing from nowhere. He was in his 50s, wearing a white lab coat over casual clothes. His expression was neutral, unreadable. "That's me. I have your delivery. Thank you for coming all this way. Please back your truck up to Dock 3. Catherine looked. There was only one loading dock. "I'm at the dock. Dock 3 is around the side." She followed him around the building. There was another loading dock, identical to the first. She hadn't seen it during her walk around, but there it was. She repositioned her truck and opened the trailer. The man, he never gave his name, examined the containers, checked their digital readouts, seemed satisfied. "These are perfect. Temperature maintained beautifully." "What are they?" "Samples from other locations. We study continuity and stability across different reference points." His words made no sense, but before Catherine could ask for clarification, he continued. "Would you like to see?" "See what?" "What we do here. Since you've come all this way." Catherine should have said no. Should have gotten her signature, closed up her trailer and left. But curiosity got the better of her. "Sure." He led her inside through the loading dock. The interior was stark. White walls, fluorescent lights, perfectly clean. They walked down a corridor, past several closed doors, to a large room filled with equipment Catherine couldn't identify. Monitors, computers, strange geometric structures made of metal and glass. "We map realities," the man said. "Locations that exist in multiple states simultaneously. Places that are and aren't, depending on observation and intention." "I don't understand." "You shouldn't. Most people can't. But you've been here before, Catherine. To this facility 6 times in the past 3 years. Catherine shook her head. "No, this is my first delivery here." He pointed to one of the monitors. It showed records, delivery logs with her name, her truck number, dates going back 3 years. 6 previous deliveries to this location, all documented. "I've never been here," Catherine insisted. "You have and you haven't. Each time you come, you're entering for the first time. Each time you leave, the route collapses behind you. The next time you come, it's a different route to the same place. You never remember because the continuity breaks at the boundary." Catherine backed toward the door. "This is insane." "Is it? Tell me, how did you get here? Describe the route." She opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't. She remembered leaving Reno, remembered turning onto the mountain road, but the specific turns, the exact path, it was fuzzy, indistinct, like trying to remember a dream. "The containers you brought contain samples from locations like this one, places that exist outside normal geographic continuity. We're trying to understand how many of these locations there are, how they connect, why some people can reach them and others can't. I want to leave. Of course. Your payment has been processed. You're free to go. Catherine walked quickly back to her truck, the man following at a leisurely pace. She climbed into the cab, started the engine, closed the trailer. The man waved as she pulled away from the dock. The road back through the forest was different. Catherine noticed immediately. Different curves, different landmarks. But it led to the same gate, which opened as she approached. Beyond the gate, she found herself on Highway 89, not on the county road she'd taken to get there. The transition was instant. One moment forest road, next moment state highway with traffic and signs. Catherine pulled over, shaking. She checked her GPS history. According to the log, she'd never left Highway 89. No turn onto a county road, no hour of driving on rough terrain. The GPS showed her stopped at a rest area for 30 minutes, the exact amount of time she'd spent at the facility. Then continuing on her route. She checked her delivery paperwork, signed and stamped, confirming successful delivery. But the facility name was blank, just the coordinates. And when she entered those coordinates into her GPS now, it showed an error. Location not found. Over the following weeks, Catherine tried to find that facility again. She drove the route multiple times, tried different approaches, searched satellite imagery. Nothing. No buildings, no roads leading into the forest where she'd driven, no sign any facility existed there. But a month later, she received another delivery assignment. Same type of cargo, sealed containers. Same delivery location, coordinates in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Catherine took the assignment, curious despite her fear. The route was different this time. She approached from the south instead of west on roads she'd never driven. But she found the gate, entered the code, and drove to the facility. It looked exactly the same. The man in the lab coat greeted her. "Catherine Moore, welcome back. You said I've been here 6 times before. This is my second delivery." "From your perspective, yes, but you've made this delivery 8 times now across different continuities. Sometimes you remember the previous visits, sometimes you don't. Today you remember one other visit, next time might be different. How is this possible?" "The facility exists at a junction point. It's accessible from multiple realities, multiple versions of geography. The road you take here depends on which version you're traveling through when you receive the assignment. But you always arrive at the same place." "Why me? Why do I keep getting these deliveries?" "Because you can find us. Most drivers can't. They receive the assignment, try to follow the coordinates, get lost, and eventually give up. But you navigate the shifting routes without realizing it. You're sensitive to the variations in continuity." Catherine made that delivery and 5 more over the next year. Each time the route was different. Each time the facility was the same. Sometimes she remembered previous visits. Sometimes they felt like the first. The man in the lab coat explained that she was helping them map the junctions, that each delivery helped them understand how realities connected. Then the deliveries stopped. Catherine never received another assignment to those coordinates. She tried calling dispatch to ask about it, but they had no record of any deliveries to a facility in the Sierra Nevada. According to their system, she'd never made those trips. Catherine checked her own logs. The deliveries were there, dates, times, mileage, but the destinations were listed as different locations, normal deliveries to normal facilities. The coordinates had changed in her records, rewritten somehow. She tried to find the facility one more time, driving to the Sierra Nevadas on her own time. She searched for the gate, for the roads she'd traveled. Nothing. Just wilderness and hiking trails, as if the facility had never existed. But Catherine knows it did. She has the memories, even if the records have been altered. She remembers the man in the lab coat, the equipment, the explanations about junctions and continuity, and she wonders how many other locations like that exist, places that are only accessible through routes that shift and change, places that exist in multiple realities at once. She wonders if she's still making deliveries there in other versions of her life. If there are other Catherine Moores, other versions of herself, taking the same cargo to the same facility through different routes, all of them thinking it's their first time or second or 10th, depending on which memories bleed through from which reality. And she wonders what was really in those containers. What kind of samples need to be transported between realities? What are they testing at that junction facility? What happens if someone opens one of those sealed containers and breaks the temperature control? She doesn't have answers. Just memories of a place she can't find, records that have been rewritten, and the strange certainty that somewhere on some version of Highway 89 in some version of the Sierra Nevada mountains, that facility still exists. And some version of Catherine Moore is driving toward it right now, following coordinates that shift depending on which reality you're traveling through, delivering cargo that exists in multiple states simultaneously. Just like the facility itself, just like the routes that lead there, just like Catherine herself, existing in multiple continuities, making the same delivery over and over, never quite sure which version is real. Story 8. The Driver Who Wasn't. Marcus Webb had been a trucker for 12 years when he encountered himself on Highway 50 in Nevada, the loneliest road in America. The encounter happened on a Tuesday night in January of 2023. And it broke Marcus's understanding of identity, time, and reality in ways he's still trying to process. He was eastbound, hauling electronics from Sacramento to Denver, making his usual crossing of the Nevada desert. Highway 50 was empty that night, as it often was. Miles of dark highway, distant mountains, stars overhead. Marcus had the road to himself, or so he thought. At mile marker 87, his headlights caught another truck ahead. It was stopped on the shoulder, hazards flashing. Marcus slowed, checking his mirrors and blind spots, preparing to move over and give the stopped vehicle plenty of room. As he passed, he glanced at the truck. It was identical to his. Same model, same color, same company logo, same truck number on the door. Marcus pulled over, heart pounding. That was impossible. His truck had a unique identifier. There couldn't be another vehicle with the same number. It had to be a coincidence. Similar trucks, maybe he'd misread the number in the dark. He grabbed his flashlight and walked back to the stopped truck. As he got closer, the details became clearer. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same minor damage to the front bumper from a parking lot incident 6 months ago. Same aftermarket CB antenna Marcus had installed himself. Same mud flap pattern, same wear on the tires. The cab lights were on. Marcus approached the driver's door and looked inside. He was sitting in the driver's seat, not someone who looked like him. Marcus Webb, wearing the exact clothes Marcus was wearing right now, staring straight ahead with a blank expression. Marcus stumbled backward, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. This was impossible. You can't encounter yourself. You can't be in two places at once. He approached again, knocked on the window. The other Marcus didn't react. Marcus tried the door, unlocked. He opened it. Hey, can you hear me? The other Marcus slowly turned his head. When he spoke, it was Marcus's voice, but flat, emotionless. You should keep driving. What the hell is this? What are you? I'm you. From tomorrow, I got stuck here. Now you're going to get stuck here too. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. But here we are. Two of us, same truck, same night. The other Marcus's eyes focused on him. You're going to keep driving. You're going to make it another 73 miles. Then you're going to stop right here at mile marker 87 and you're going to wait for yourself to arrive. I'm not doing any of that. I'm getting back in my truck and leaving. You will. But then you'll come back. The highway loops here. You'll drive and drive, and you'll end up back at this marker. And when you do, there will be another you, stopped here, warning himself. Just like I'm doing now. Marcus backed away from the truck. This was insane. A breakdown, maybe. Exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. He walked back to his truck, climbed in, and drove. He kept his eyes on the road, didn't look in his mirrors at the impossible duplicate. He drove for an hour, watching the mile markers increase. 87, 95, 112, 126. The highway was straight, normal. He passed through a small town, saw lights and houses and normal civilization. This was fine. What he'd seen was a hallucination, stress, something explainable. At mile marker 160, his GPS glitched. The route line wavered, and for a moment the screen showed him back at mile marker 87. Then it corrected, showing his actual position. Marcus kept driving, 170, 180. The landscape began to look familiar, but Nevada desert all looked similar. 200, 210. His odometer showed he'd driven over 100 miles from mile marker 87. Then he saw the stopped truck ahead, hazards flashing. Same location, same position. Mile marker 87. Marcus slammed on his brakes, pulling over hard. This wasn't possible. He'd driven east for over 2 hours. He should be halfway across Nevada by now, but there was mile marker 87 and there was the truck. He got out, walked to the stopped vehicle. 2 trucks sat there now, the one he'd seen earlier and another, both identical to his. In the first truck, the earlier version of himself sat in the driver's seat, blank and unresponsive. In the second truck, another Marcus sat, but this one was moving, checking his mirrors, about to get out. Marcus watched himself. The second version climbed down and approached the first truck. Watched himself knock on the window, have the same conversation, receive the same warning. Then the second Marcus walked back to his truck and drove away. Marcus stood there trying to understand. He was watching a loop of himself, repeated. How many times had this happened? How many versions of Marcus Webb had stopped at mile marker 87, encountered themselves, driven away, and circled back? He walked to his own truck, the one he'd arrived in, and checked the odometer. It showed he'd driven the miles he'd actually driven, over 300 miles since leaving Sacramento. But spatially, he'd returned to the same point. Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't drive away this time. He'd stay here, break the loop by not repeating what the other versions had done. He sat in his truck and waited. An hour passed, then another. Nothing happened. The other trucks sat silently, their drivers frozen in whatever state they'd been left in. Marcus got out, checked them. Still there, still identical, still impossible. Then headlights appeared in the distance. Another truck approaching, slowing as it saw the stopped vehicles. Marcus watched it pull over, watched himself get out. Another version, another iteration. This Marcus approached the first stopped truck, had the conversation, walked back to his truck, and drove away. The loop continued without Marcus's participation. He was outside it now, watching it repeat. But he was also still part of it. Those were all him, all Marcus Webb, all driving the same truck, hauling the same cargo, trapped in the same repeating scenario. Marcus tried to stop the next version. When another truck pulled over and another Marcus got out, Marcus ran to him, grabbed his shoulder. "Stop! Don't drive away! Stay here!" The other Marcus looked at him with confusion. "Who are you?" "I'm you. We're stuck in a loop. You have to..." But the other Marcus pulled away, got back in his truck, and drove off. From his perspective, Marcus was a stranger, someone else. The loop only made sense from inside it. From outside, you were just an observer. Marcus tried calling for help. No phone signal. He tried his CB radio. Static. He tried driving away again, choosing west instead of east. But the highway took him back to mile marker 87 after an hour of driving. He was trapped, but in a different way than the other versions of himself. They were trapped in the loop, repeating their encounter and drive. He was trapped outside the loop, watching it repeat, unable to break it or escape it. Days passed, or what felt like days. Time was weird here. Marcus would sleep, wake up, and watch more versions of himself arrive, encounter the stopped trucks, and drive away. Sometimes the arriving Marcus would stop and talk to the stopped versions for longer. Sometimes he'd barely pause before driving on. But they all came back to mile marker 87 eventually. Marcus counted 37 versions of himself before he stopped counting. 37 trucks, all identical, all with him inside. Some of the earlier versions had started to decay, not physically, but somehow existentially. The Marcus in those trucks looked less real, more like photographs or projections. They were wearing down, fading. Then one night, or what passed for night in this timeless loop, something different happened. A truck pulled over, but it wasn't Marcus's truck. It was a different model, different company. A woman got out. "Thank God," Marcus said. "You have to help me. I'm stuck here. There are dozens of me, and I can't get away from this mile marker." The woman looked at him with pity. "You're stuck in a convergence loop. I've seen these before. Multiple versions of the same person, same vehicle, all arriving at the same decision point and creating a recursive timeline. How do I get out? You don't. Once the loop starts, it feeds on itself. Each version of you that arrives strengthens it. Eventually, you'll fade like the older versions, and new ones will keep arriving. The loop will contain hundreds of you, maybe thousands, all doing the same thing. There has to be a way out. There is, but you won't like it. You have to not be you anymore. Change something fundamental about yourself. Make a decision you would never make. Break the pattern that defines you." Marcus thought about this. What defined him? His dedication to his job, his following of rules, his careful attention to routine. He was predictable, methodical, consistent. That's what made him a good trucker. "What if I abandon the truck?" he said. "Just walk away from it. Would that break the loop?" "Maybe. If you can really do it. If you can really abandon your cargo, your responsibility, everything you think defines you as a trucker." Marcus looked at his truck, or the version that was his, though they were all his. Could he walk away from it? Leave a load undelivered, break his perfect record, violate everything he'd built his career on? He started walking. Away from the trucks, away from mile marker 87 into the desert darkness. Every step was hard, like walking through syrup. His mind screamed at him to go back, to check the cargo, to complete the delivery. But he kept walking. Behind him, he heard engines starting. Multiple engines, all his trucks, all the versions of himself starting up and driving away. The loop breaking as he broke himself. Marcus walked through the night. When dawn came, he was on a different highway, nowhere near Highway 50. A state trooper found him and gave him a ride to the nearest town. Marcus called his company, reported his truck stolen, couldn't explain what had happened. They found his truck later, the original, the real one, parked at a rest stop near Salt Lake City. The cargo was intact, undelivered but undamaged. The log showed he'd driven straight from Sacramento to Salt Lake without stopping, no deviation, no time missing. As if the entire experience at mile marker 87 had never happened. But Marcus knows it happened. He knows there are dozens of versions of himself still trapped at that mile marker, or maybe the loop collapsed when he walked away. He doesn't know. He's never driven Highway 50 again, can't bring himself to check. He quit trucking 6 months later. The job didn't feel the same after he'd abandoned a load, after he'd proven he could walk away. That had been his identity, the driver who always delivered, who never quit, who followed through no matter what. Breaking that broke something in him. Now Marcus works in a warehouse, never traveling far, never getting into a truck. But sometimes he dreams he's back at mile marker 87, watching himself arrive, watching the loop repeat. And in those dreams he sees that it's still happening. New versions of Marcus Webb still pull over, still encounter the stopped trucks, still get trapped in the convergence. Because maybe walking away didn't break the loop. Maybe it just excluded him from it. Maybe it continues without him, an infinite number of Marcus Webbs arriving at the same decision point, making the same choices, creating an eternal recursion of his own predictable nature. And Marcus wonders, if he went back, would he see himself still there? Not the current Marcus who walked away, but the Marcus he used to be, the trucker who would never abandon a load? Would that version still be trapped, still watching himself arrive over and over? He doesn't want to know. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some roads are better left undriven. And some versions of yourself are better left behind, trapped in loops of their own making, while you move forward into whatever comes next, even if moving forward means you're no longer quite yourself anymore.